The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the quiet suburban neighborhood. The streets were lined with neatly trimmed lawns and mailboxes painted in cheerful colors. It was the kind of place where people waved at each other from their porches and kids played basketball in driveways until dinner time. But beneath its peaceful surface, tensions simmered, tensions that would soon boil over into something unforgettable. Officer Daniel Hayes sat in his patrol car, parked near the corner of Maple Street. He had been on duty for 6 hours already, circling the same blocks over and over again. To most, he appeared to be just another cop doing his job, keeping the town safe. But those who knew him well, or even casually, knew there was more to Daniel than met the eye. For years, whispers about his behavior had floated around the station. Some called him old school, while others labeled him outright cruel. His colleagues avoided working shifts with him whenever possible, knowing full well how quick he was to snap at anyone who didn't fit his narrow view of what was right. On this particular evening, Daniel's eyes narrowed as he scanned the area. He liked order, he liked rules, and above all he liked control. Anything out of place irritated him, whether it was a broken streetlight flickering in the distance or someone jaywalking across an empty road. So when he spotted a young girl standing alone at the bus stop, clutching her backpack tightly, his instincts kicked in immediately. She looked ordinary enough, jeans, sneakers, a hoodie pulled up against the evening chill. But to Daniel, she stood out like a sore thumb. Why? Because she was black. Mia Thompson wasn't thinking about any of this as she waited for the light to change so she could cross the street. At 12 years old, Mia was used to walking home from school by herself. Her parents both worked long hours, and she had learned early on how to take care of herself. Today, however, felt different. Something about the way the police car lingered nearby made her stomach twist uncomfortably. She tried not to look at it, focusing instead on the rhythmic tapping of her foot against the curb. Maybe if she stayed still and quiet, the officer wouldn't notice her. But Officer Hayes did notice. In fact, he couldn't stop staring. His mind raced with questions. What was she doing here? Wasn't this a good part of town? Didn't these kinds of kids belong somewhere else? Before he could stop himself, he rolled down his window and called out, "Hey, you there!" His voice was sharp, commanding, cutting through the calm of the evening like a knife. Startled, Mia turned toward the sound. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the uniform. "Yes?" she replied hesitantly, her voice barely audible. "Why aren't you crossing?" Hayes demanded, his tone accusatory. "What are you waiting for?" Mia blinked, confused. "The light," she stammered. "I'm waiting for the light to change." Hayes scoffed, leaning slightly out of his window. "Don't give me that. Nonsense. I've seen plenty of people cross without waiting. Are you trying to cause trouble?" "No, sir," Mia said quickly, shaking her head. "I'm just following the rules." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Hayes let out a humorless laugh. "Rules, huh? Funny coming from someone like you." Mia froze. Someone like you. Those 4 words hit her like a punch to the gut. She didn't understand what he meant, but she knew it wasn't good. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she forced herself not to cry. She had learned from experience that showing weakness only made things worse. "What's your name?" Hayes barked, interrupting her thoughts. "Mia," she whispered. "Well, Mia," he continued, dragging her name out mockingly, "maybe next time you'll think twice before wasting my time. Now get moving before I write you up for loitering." With that, he rolled up his window and drove off, leaving Mia standing there trembling. The light finally changed, but she barely noticed. All she wanted was to get home, to crawl into bed and forget the whole thing ever happened. Little did she know, this encounter was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that would ripple through the entire community. As Mia walked the rest of the way home, her mind replayed every word Hayes had said. She couldn't shake the eye, feeling that she'd done something wrong, even though she knew deep down she hadn't. By the time she reached her front door, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. Inside, her mother, Lisa, was cooking dinner in the kitchen. When she saw Mia's tear-streaked face, she dropped the spoon she was holding and rushed over. "What happened?" Lisa asked, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. Between sobs, Mia recounted the entire incident. Lisa listened intently, her expression growing darker with each passing second. Once Mia finished, Lisa took a deep breath, trying to stay calm for her daughter's sake. "It's okay, baby," she murmured, stroking Mia's hair. "You didn't do anything wrong. That man, he's the one who should be ashamed." Lisa spent the rest of the evening comforting Mia, reminding her that she was strong and brave. But inside, Lisa seethed. How dare that officer treat her child like a criminal? She knew racism existed. It wasn't exactly a secret. But hearing about it firsthand, especially involving her own flesh and blood, ignited a fire within her. She decided then and there that she wouldn't let this go unanswered. The next morning, Lisa posted about the incident on social media, sharing Mia's side of the story. She included details about how the officer had singled Mia out, based solely on her race, hoping to raise awareness and prevent similar situations in the future. Within hours, her post went viral. People from all over the country shared it, expressing outrage and solidarity. Comments poured in, some offering support, others recounting their own experiences with racial profiling. Local activists reached out, eager to help amplify Mia's voice. Meanwhile, Officer Hayes remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. He reported for duty the following day as usual, patrolling the same streets, stopping the same suspicious individuals. If anything, he felt proud of himself. After all, he believed he was doing his job, keeping the community safe. What he failed to realize was that his actions had consequences far beyond what he could imagine. By the end of the week, protests began popping up outside the police station. Dozens of people gathered, holding signs that read, "Justice for Mia," and "End racial profiling." News crews arrived, broadcasting live updates to thousands of viewers. The pressure mounted rapidly, forcing the police chief to address the situation publicly. At first, he defended Hayes, insisting that the officer had acted appropriately. But as more evidence surfaced, including witness accounts and security footage, the department found itself backed into a corner. Behind closed doors, discussions grew heated. Some officers argued that Hayes deserved a second chance, citing his years of service. Others, however, pointed out the pattern of discriminatory behavior that had followed him throughout his career. One junior officer bravely spoke up, recounting how Hayes had once referred to a group of Latino teenagers as gangbangers, despite zero evidence supporting the claim. Another mentioned overhearing him make derogatory remarks about Muslim residents during a briefing. Each revelation chipped away at Hayes's credibility, painting a damning portrait of a man unfit to wear the badge. As the investigation unfolded, Hayes became increasingly defensive. He refused to admit fault, doubling down on his belief that he had done nothing wrong. "She was suspicious," he insisted during interviews. "You can't trust everyone you see on the street." But his excuses fell flat, drowned out by the overwhelming chorus of voices demanding accountability. Back at home, Mia watched the news coverage with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt validated knowing that so many people supported her. On the other hand, reliving the trauma of that day was exhausting. Still, she drew strength from her mother's unwavering determination and the encouragement of strangers who praised her courage. Slowly but surely, she began to see herself not as a victim, but as a survivor, a young girl whose resilience inspired others to stand up against injustice. And so, the stage was set for what would become a pivotal moment in the town's history. Officer Hayes's actions had sparked a movement, one that refused to be silenced. Karma, it seemed, had plans of its own, and they were just getting started. The protests outside the police station grew louder with each passing day. What had started as a small gathering of concerned citizens quickly turned into a massive demonstration, drawing people from neighboring towns and cities. Signs bearing slogans like "Protect our kids" and "No justice, no peace" filled the air, while chants echoed through the streets. "Say her name, Mia Thompson. The energy was electric, fueled by anger, frustration, and a deep desire for change. Local. Activists took charge, organizing rallies, marches, and town hall meetings to keep the momentum going. Among them was Marcus Reed, a seasoned community organizer who had spent decades fighting against systemic racism. With his calm demeanor and sharp mind, Marcus became the face of the movement. He worked closely with Mia's family, ensuring their voices remained at the forefront of the campaign. Together they crafted a clear set of demands: an immediate investigation into Officer Hayes' conduct, accountability for his actions, and sweeping reforms within the police department. To prevent future incidents, media coverage only amplified the pressure on law enforcement. Reporters camped outside the station, bombarding officials with questions about the case. Social media played a crucial role too, with hashtags like Justice for Mia trending nationwide. People shared stories of their own encounters with racial profiling, creating a tidal wave of support for Mia and her family. Even celebrities weighed in, using their platforms to call attention to the issue. It was impossible to ignore. The entire country seemed to be watching. Inside the police department, tensions ran high. Officers whispered nervously in hallways, unsure of what would happen next. Some sympathized with Mia, quietly admitting that Hayes' behavior had always been problematic. Others defended him, arguing that he was simply doing his job. Meanwhile, the police chief found himself caught between two opposing forces: public outrage demanding justice and the loyalty he felt toward one of his own. After days of deliberation, he finally announced that an internal investigation would take place. Though many saw this as a step forward, skeptics questioned whether the department could truly investigate itself without bias. As the inquiry began, witnesses came forward, shedding light on Hayes' troubling history. One officer recounted how Hayes had once pulled over a black driver for no apparent reason, accusing him of stealing the car despite valid registration papers. Another described how Hayes frequently made offensive jokes during briefings, targeting anyone who didn't fit his narrow definition of normal. These testimonies painted a picture of a man consumed by prejudice, someone who viewed authority not as a tool for service but as a weapon for control. Perhaps the most damning evidence came from surveillance footage captured near the bus stop where Mia had been stopped. A nearby store's camera had recorded part of the encounter, showing Hayes aggressively questioning Mia while she stood frozen, visibly frightened. The video went viral almost instantly, sparking even more outrage. Viewers couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between Hayes' towering presence and Mia's small frame. To see such a powerful figure intimidate a child struck a chord with millions, further galvanizing the movement. Despite mounting pressure, Hayes remained defiant. When called in for questioning, he refused to apologize or acknowledge any wrongdoing. "I'm just doing my job," he repeated stubbornly, his tone dripping with resentment. "If people don't like it, that's their problem." His attitude infuriated those involved in the investigation, reinforcing the belief that he was incapable of change. The turning point came when a young woman named Sarah Collins stepped forward. Sarah had worked as a dispatcher at the station several years ago and had witnessed firsthand how Hayes treated minorities. During her testimony, she revealed a chilling story. One night, after responding to a domestic disturbance call involving a mixed-race couple, Hayes had muttered under his breath, "This is why we need stricter laws. These kinds of relationships are unnatural." Sarah's voice trembled as she recounted the memory, adding that she had reported the comment to her supervisor, but nothing had been done about it. Sarah's bravery inspired others to speak up. Former colleagues, acquaintances, and even old classmates began sharing their own experiences with Hayes. Each new account added weight to the growing pile of evidence against him. By the time the investigation concluded, there was little doubt left. Hayes had abused his power repeatedly, targeting individuals based solely on their race or ethnicity. The findings were presented to the police chief, who faced an agonizing decision. Should he protect one of his officers, or do what was right for the community? In the end, the choice was clear. On a crisp Monday morning, Hayes was summoned to the chief's office. Flanked by two senior officers, he listened silently as the verdict was delivered. Effective immediately, He was stripped of his badge and terminated from the force. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Hayes's heavy breathing. For 15 years, that badge had defined him. It had been his identity, his pride, his purpose. Now it was gone. News of Hayes's firing spread like wildfire. Protesters erupted into cheers outside the station, celebrating the victory they had fought so hard for. Cars honked their horns in solidarity, and strangers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. For Mia and her family, the moment was bittersweet. They were relieved that Hayes would no longer have the power to harm anyone else, but the scars he had left behind would take much longer to heal. That evening, Mia sat on her bed, staring at the news coverage on her laptop. She scrolled through social media, reading messages from people all over the world who had rallied behind her. "You're so brave," one comment read. "Thank you for speaking up," said another. Her heart swelled with gratitude, but also with a newfound sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. Her mother, Lisa, knocked softly before entering the room. "How are you holding up?" she asked, sitting beside Mia. "I don't know," Mia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It feels good knowing that people care, but I keep thinking, what if this happens to someone else?" Lisa wrapped an arm around her daughter, pulling her close. "We won't let it," she promised. "This fight isn't over yet. We've got to make sure something like this never happens again." Mia nodded slowly, determination flickering in her eyes. She realized then that her story had become bigger than herself. It was a catalyst for change, a reminder that even the smallest voices could spark movements capable of shaking entire systems to their core. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the town, Mia closed her laptop and leaned into her mother's embrace. Outside, the protests continued, their chants ringing out like a chorus of hope. Somewhere in the distance, a solitary figure trudged home, his head bowed low beneath the weight of his shame. Karma, it seemed, had dealt its first blow, but the ripple effects of justice were only beginning to unfold. The days following Officer Daniel Hayes's dismissal were a blur of emotions for everyone involved. For Mia and her family, there was a sense of vindication, but also lingering unease. Losing his badge had been a significant victory, yet it couldn't erase the trauma of that fateful day at the bus stop. Meanwhile, Hayes himself retreated into isolation, grappling with the fallout of his actions. Stripped of the authority he had wielded for so long, he found himself adrift in a world that no longer respected or feared him. At first, Hayes tried to downplay the situation. He told anyone who would listen that he had been railroaded by activists and biased investigators. To him, the protests and media frenzy were nothing more than a witch hunt, an attack on law enforcement itself. But as weeks turned into months, reality set in. Finding another job proved nearly impossible. No one wanted to hire a disgraced ex-officer with a reputation for racial bias. His applications for security guard positions were met with rejection after rejection, each email delivering another blow to his already fragile ego. Desperate for income, Hayes eventually settled for odd jobs around town, mowing lawns, cleaning gutters, and stocking shelves at a local grocery store. The work was menial and exhausting, a far cry from the structured life he had once known. Worse still, people recognized him wherever he went. At the gas station, customers whispered behind his back. On the street, strangers shot him dirty looks or muttered insults under their breath. Once revered as a symbol of authority, Hayes now felt like an outcast, shunned by the very community he claimed to have served. One particularly humiliating incident occurred during his brief stint as a mall security guard. Assigned to patrol the food court, Hayes spotted a group of rowdy teenagers loitering near the fountain. Their loud laughter and careless gestures annoyed him, stirring memories of the control he used to wield. Determined to assert some semblance of power, he approached them with his usual air of superiority. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked, glaring at the teens. "This isn't your living room. Move along." The teenagers exchanged glances before bursting into laughter. One of them, a lanky boy wearing a hoodie, smirked and said, "Who even are you? You don't look like a cop." "I was a cop," Hayes snapped, straightening his posture. "And I'll tell you right now, I won't tolerate disrespect." His words only made them laugh harder. Another teen, a girl with bright pink hair, leaned forward and quipped, "Oh wow, a washed-up cop trying to play tough guy. Should we be scared?" Humiliated, Hayes opened his mouth to retort, but the group simply stood up and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the food court. Parents seated nearby watched the exchange, shaking their heads disapprovingly. For Hayes, the moment was a bitter reminder of how powerless he had become without the shield of his former title. Karma, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. While Hayes struggled to adjust to his new reality, Mia focused on healing and rebuilding her confidence. With support from her family, teachers, and therapists, she began channeling her experiences into art. Drawing had always been her escape, a way to express emotions too complex for words, and now it became her lifeline. She filled sketchbooks with vivid images, bold portraits of young black girls standing tall, landscapes bursting with color and hope, and abstract pieces that captured the pain and resilience of her journey. Her artwork caught the attention of a local gallery owner named Mrs. Evelyn Carter, who specialized in showcasing emerging artists. Impressed by Mia's talent and message, Evelyn offered her a spot in an upcoming exhibition titled Voices of Tomorrow. The theme centered on youth, activism, making it the perfect platform for Mia to share her story. Though nervous about putting herself in the spotlight again, Mia agreed, knowing it was an opportunity to inspire others. On the night of the exhibition, the gallery buzzed with energy. Friends, family, activists, and curious visitors filled the space, admiring the diverse array of artwork displayed on the walls. When Mia arrived, escorted by her proud parents, she was greeted with warm applause. Her piece, a striking mixed-media collage titled Standing Strong, was prominently featured near the entrance. It depicted a young girl surrounded by swirling shadows, yet her face radiated light and determination. Beneath the artwork hung a plaque with Mia's artist's statement, "This is me. This is what it feels like to stand up when the world tries to push you down. My voice matters, and so does yours." As guests mingled, many stopped to speak with Mia, praising her courage and creativity. A journalist from the local newspaper interviewed her, asking about her inspiration and hopes for the future. Mia spoke softly but confidently, explaining how art had helped her process her emotions and connect with others who had faced similar struggles. By the end of the evening, dozens of attendees had purchased prints of her work, eager to support her mission of spreading awareness and fostering change. Mia's newfound visibility brought additional opportunities. Schools invited her to give talks about overcoming adversity, while community organizations asked her to collaborate on projects promoting diversity and inclusion. Through these platforms, she discovered a passion for advocacy. She joined forces with local activists, attending meetings and brainstorming ways to address systemic racism within institutions like schools and law enforcement. Her mother, Lisa, often accompanied her, marveling at how much her daughter had grown since that heartbreaking day at the bus stop. But Karma wasn't done teaching lessons, not to Hayes, nor to the system that had allowed him to operate unchecked for so long. Just as Mia's star was rising, Hayes received a letter summoning him to court. Mia's family had pursued legal action against him, seeking damages for emotional distress caused by his discriminatory behavior. The trial was scheduled for the following month, and Hayes knew he couldn't avoid it this time. Sitting in the courtroom on the day of the trial, Hayes looked pale and haggard. Gone was the imposing figure who had once intimidated Mia. Instead, he appeared diminished, almost frail. Rows of spectators packed the benches, including members of the media, activists, and ordinary citizens eager to witness justice being served. As the proceedings began, witnesses took the stand one by one, recounting the events leading up to and following the infamous bus stop encounter. Mia herself testified, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. She described how terrified she had felt facing Hayes, how his words had cut deep and left lasting scars. "I didn't understand why he treated me differently," she said, her eyes locked on the judge. "All I did was wait for the light to change. I wasn't hurting anyone." Her testimony resonated deeply with those present, drawing murmurs of sympathy from the crowd. When it was Hayes's turn to speak, he stumbled over his answers, unable to justify his actions convincingly. His attempts to shift blame onto vague notions of maintaining order fell flat, undermined by the mountain of evidence stacked against him. Even his own lawyer seemed reluctant to defend him, offering weak arguments that barely scratched the surface of the case. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the verdict was announced. Hayes was found liable for emotional distress and ordered to pay a substantial fine. The courtroom erupted in cheers, though Mia remained composed, her expression unreadable. As Hayes slunk out of the building, cameras flashing in his face, she felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the legal battle was over, and sorrow for the toll it had taken on everyone involved, including him. In the weeks that followed, Hayes disappeared from public view altogether. Rumors circulated that he had moved to a neighboring state, taking whatever low-paying job he could find. No one mourned his absence. If anything, they breathed easier, knowing he was no longer part of their lives. Karma had delivered its punishment, leaving Hayes to reflect on the choices that had led him here. For Mia, however, the journey was just beginning. She continued using her voice and art to advocate for justice, determined to ensure that stories like hers wouldn't fade into obscurity. Her resilience inspired countless others, proving that even the smallest acts of bravery could ignite meaningful change. And though the scars of the past would always remain, Mia carried them not as burdens but as reminders of how far she and her community had come. Months had passed since the trial, and the town was slowly beginning to heal. The case of Mia Thompson versus Officer Daniel Hayes had left an indelible mark on everyone who lived there. Conversations about racial profiling, police accountability, and systemic racism were no longer whispered behind closed doors. They were openly discussed at dinner tables, school assemblies, and community meetings. People were waking up to the reality that change wasn't just necessary, it was urgent. For Mia, life had taken on a new rhythm. She was still the same bright-eyed girl who loved drawing and dreamed of becoming an artist, but she carried herself differently now. There was a quiet strength in her posture, a confidence born from surviving something unimaginable and turning it into fuel for good. Her artwork continued to gain recognition, with galleries across the state inviting her to showcase her pieces. Each exhibition brought more attention to her cause, drawing larger crowds eager to hear her story and support her mission. But fame wasn't what drove Mia, it was purpose. After witnessing firsthand how powerful storytelling could be, she decided to dedicate herself to amplifying marginalized voices. With guidance from local activists, she launched a project called Youth Voices Matter. The initiative provided workshops and resources for young people to express their experiences through various forms of art, painting, writing, music, photography, and more. It quickly became a safe space where kids felt seen and heard, many of them sharing stories eerily similar to Mia's own. One Saturday afternoon, Mia stood in front of a classroom full of teenagers, all armed with sketch pads and pencils. They ranged in age from 12 to 18, hailing from different backgrounds and neighborhoods. Some had grown up in affluent areas, while others came from struggling communities. Despite their differences, they shared one thing in common: a desire to make sense of the world around them. "Art doesn't have to be perfect," Mia told the group, holding up her own sketch pad as an example. "It just has to be honest. If you're angry, let your pencil show it. If you're scared, let your colors tell the story. Whatever you're feeling, don't hold back." The room buzzed with energy as the teens began sketching furiously. One boy drew jagged lines representing the tension he felt whenever sirens wailed outside his window. A girl sitting nearby filled her page with soft pastels, explaining later that they symbolized hope amidst chaos. Another participant, a shy freshman named Jamal, surprised everyone when he unveiled a charcoal portrait of his older brother, who had been wrongfully arrested years ago. Tears welled up in Jamal's eyes as he explained how much it meant to finally share his family's pain. Seeing these moments unfold reinforced Mia's belief in the power of creativity. Art wasn't just a form of self-expression, it was a tool for connection, empathy, and healing. Through Youth Voices Matter, she hoped to create a generation of advocates unafraid to challenge injustice wherever they found it. Meanwhile, the police department faced mounting pressure to reform its practices. The public outcry following Hayes' dismissal hadn't faded. If anything, it had intensified. Community leaders demanded transparency, accountability, and meaningful action. In response, the department introduced a series of training programs designed to address implicit bias and improve relationships between officers and residents. Officers were required to attend workshops led by diversity experts, participate in role-playing exercises, and engage in regular discussions about race and privilege. Some officers embraced the changes wholeheartedly, recognizing the need for improvement. Others resisted, grumbling about political correctness and claiming the reforms undermined their ability to do their jobs effectively. Among this latter group was Lieutenant Greg Morrison, a longtime colleague of Hayes's. Though he had never outwardly supported Hayes's behavior, Morrison privately believed the entire ordeal had been blown out of proportion. He resented the scrutiny placed on law enforcement and often voiced his frustrations during staff meetings. "You think we're not already under enough stress?" Morrison snapped during one particularly heated session. "Now we've got to tiptoe around every little thing? What happened to protecting and serving?" His comments sparked a tense debate among the officers. Sergeant Laura Chen, a rising star within the department, challenged him directly. "Protecting and serving isn't about wielding power. It's about earning trust," she said firmly. "If we want the community to respect us, we need to start respecting them. That means listening, learning, and changing when we're wrong." Morrison rolled his eyes but didn't argue further. Deep down, he knew Chen had a point, though pride prevented him from admitting it aloud. Over time, even skeptics like Morrison began to see the value in the new initiatives. As officers started attending block parties, volunteering at youth centers, and hosting open forums with residents, attitudes began shifting, slowly but surely. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight, but small gestures went a long way toward bridging the gap between the police force and the people they served. Back in the shadows, Hayes watched all of this unfold from afar. Unable to secure steady employment, he drifted from one temporary job to another, scraping by on meager wages. His days were filled with monotony and regret, his nights plagued by restless dreams. Sometimes he would sit alone in his dimly lit apartment, staring at old photographs of himself in uniform. Those images served as painful reminders of everything he had lost: the respect, the authority, the sense of belonging. Occasionally, Hayes entertained thoughts of revenge. He fantasized about exposing the hypocrisy of the system that had betrayed him, imagining scenarios where he exposed corruption or proved everyone wrong. But deep down, he knew such fantasies were futile. Karma had dealt its blow, and there was no undoing the damage. All he could do was endure day after day, haunted by the choices that had led him here. In contrast, Mia thrived. Her advocacy work earned her invitations to speak at conferences and schools far beyond her hometown. She traveled to neighboring cities, delivering speeches that inspired audiences of all ages. One memorable event took place at a high school auditorium packed with students and faculty. As Mia stepped onto the stage, clad in a simple blouse and jeans, the crowd erupted into applause. She smiled shyly before launching into her speech. "When I was 12 years old," she began, "I thought my voice didn't matter. I thought speaking up would only make things worse. But then I realized something important. Silence is complicity. When we stay quiet, we allow injustice to continue unchecked. So today, I'm asking you to use your voices, not just for yourselves, but for those who can't speak for themselves." By the end of her speech, the audience was on their feet, cheering wildly. Students lined up afterward to thank her, some tearfully confessing how her words had given them courage. Teachers praised her maturity and wisdom, marveling at how someone so young could carry such insight. For Mia, these interactions were proof that her efforts were making a difference. As months turned into years, the ripple effects of Mia's activism became undeniable. Schools implemented anti-bias curricula inspired by her message. Local businesses partnered with organizations to fund scholarships for underprivileged youth. Even politicians cited her work when drafting legislation aimed at promoting equity and inclusion. What had started as a personal journey had blossomed into a movement, a testament to the power of resilience and determination. And yet, despite all the progress, Mia remained grounded. She understood that true change required patience and persistence. Racism, inequality, and injustice weren't problems that could be solved overnight. They were deeply rooted issues demanding constant vigilance. Still, she refused to lose hope. Every painting sold, every workshop held, every speech delivered brought her closer to the world she envisioned, one where everyone, regardless of skin color or background, could walk home without fear. As for Hayes, karma ensured his descent continued unabated. Stripped of his badge, dignity, and purpose, he faded into obscurity, remembered only as a cautionary tale. His name occasionally surfaced in conversations about accountability, but rarely with sympathy. Instead, it served as a reminder of the consequences awaiting those who abuse their power. In the end, Mia's story was about more than justice. It was about transformation. Herself, her community, even the flawed systems they sought to reform, all were irrevocably changed by the events that unfolded. And though scars remained, they bore witness not to defeat, but to triumph. A testament to the enduring spirit of those who refused to remain silent in the face of injustice. Years had passed since the incident that changed Mia Thompson's life forever. The once quiet suburb where she grew up now buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. Streets lined with colorful murals celebrated diversity, schools hosted annual cultural festivals, and community centers thrived as hubs of collaboration between residents and law enforcement. It was hard to imagine this town as the same place where fear and prejudice had once reigned supreme. Yet none of this transformation would have been possible without the courage of one young girl who dared to speak up. Mia, now 17, stood in front of a massive crowd gathered at the town square. She wore a bright yellow dress, her hair styled into braids adorned with beads, a nod to her heritage. Behind her loomed a towering statue unveiled just moments ago, a bronze figure of a young black girl holding a sketchpad, gazing boldly toward the horizon. The inscription at its base read, "To every voice that refuses to be silenced." It was dedicated not only to Mia but also to countless others whose stories had inspired change. The idea for the statue had come from Marcus Reed, the activist who had championed Mia's cause years earlier. "This isn't just about remembering what happened," Marcus had explained during the planning stages. "It's about honoring resilience, the kind of strength that turns pain into progress." As Mia addressed the audience, her voice carried over the sea of faces, some familiar, many unfamiliar. Families sat on picnic blankets, children clapped excitedly, and elders nodded approvingly. Even former skeptics within the police department attended, wearing civilian clothes instead of uniforms, their presence signaling solidarity rather than authority. "When I first walked home from school that day," Mia began, pausing to collect herself, "I never imagined my story would reach so far. I didn't think anyone would care. But you proved me wrong. Together we turned hurt into hope, anger into action, and silence into sound." Her words resonated deeply, eliciting cheers and applause. People held signs bearing messages like, "We stand with you," and "Justice starts here." Cameras flashed, capturing every moment of this historic event. For Mia, it wasn't just a celebration of her journey. It was a reminder of how far they had all come together. Meanwhile, miles away, Daniel Hayes lived a solitary existence in a rundown apartment. Time had done little to ease his bitterness. He spent his days watching TV or staring out the window, replaying memories of his time as an officer. Each flashback stung, a cruel reminder of the power and respect he had lost. Occasionally, he scrolled through old news articles about Mia, resentful of the fame she had achieved while he faded into obscurity. But no matter how much he tried to justify his actions, guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. One evening, Hayes received an unexpected visitor, Sarah Collins, the former dispatcher who had testified against him during the investigation. Now working as a counselor for troubled youth, Sarah had heard rumors of Hayes's struggles and felt compelled to confront him one last time. "I'm not here to gloat," she said, as he reluctantly led her inside. His apartment was cluttered and dim, reflecting the chaos of his life. "I wanted to see if you've learned anything." Hayes scowled, crossing his arms defensively. "What's there to learn? My career was destroyed because people couldn't handle the truth." Sarah sighed, shaking her head. "The truth is, Dan, you treated people like criminals based on their skin color. That's not justice, it's cruelty. And it doesn't take away from your mistakes to admit that." For a long moment, Hayes said nothing. Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, he muttered, "Maybe I was wrong about some things." Though hesitant, Sarah offered him a small smile. "Admitting that is a start. Maybe someday you'll find a way to make amends. Not for us, but for yourself." She left shortly after, leaving Hayes alone with his thoughts. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to consider her words. Could he ever rebuild his life, or was he destined to remain trapped in regret? Back in town, Mia continued blazing trails. Her advocacy work expanded beyond art to include mentorship programs for teenagers navigating challenges similar to hers. One of her mentees, Jamal, the boy who had drawn his brother during a workshop, was now excelling in school and considering a career in social justice. Another participant, Emma, had started a blog documenting her experiences growing up biracial in a predominantly white neighborhood. These successes filled Mia with pride, knowing she had helped ignite sparks of change in others. Her parents, Lisa and James, watched their daughter blossom with awe. "She's extraordinary," Lisa often told friends, tears welling up in her eyes. Not just because of what she's accomplished, but because of who she is. Even the police department underwent significant transformation. Under new leadership, officers embraced community policing strategies, prioritizing trust building over enforcement. Regular meetings between residents and law enforcement fostered open dialogue, addressing concerns before they escalated. Training. Programs focused on empathy and cultural sensitivity became standard practice, ensuring future generations of officers served with integrity. At the heart of these changes was Sergeant Laura Chen, whose dedication to reform earned her a promotion to captain. During a town hall meeting, she acknowledged the department's flawed past while emphasizing its commitment to growth. "We will never forget the lessons we've learned," she declared. "Our job isn't just to enforce laws, it's to protect humanity, and we owe it to Mia and everyone else to do better." As the sun set on the day of the statue unveiling, Mia joined her family and friends for dinner at their favorite restaurant. Laughter echoed around the table as they reminisced about the highs and lows of their journey. Despite everything, Mia felt grateful, not just for the support she'd received, but for the opportunity to inspire others. Later that night, as she lay in bed sketching ideas for her next project, Mia reflected on how far she'd come. From a scared 12-year-old standing at a bus stop to a fearless advocate leading a movement, her path had been anything but easy. But each challenge had shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Outside her window, stars twinkled brightly against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, karma continued its quiet work, balancing scales tipped by prejudice and redemption. And though scars remained, from shattered reputations to broken systems, they served as reminders of the resilience required to forge a better tomorrow. In the end, Mia's story wasn't just about justice for one girl. It was about justice for everyone. It proved that even the smallest voices could spark movements capable of toppling giants. As long as people refused to stay silent, hope would prevail, and change would follow.